knows we're here, right? He didn't go to the other building, did he?
That was an option.
We will go ahead and get started. This is a council of the whole meeting to discuss possible amendments to proposed city zoning code. Although this is not a formal council meeting, I would like to conduct it sort of in a formal manner where someone can make a motion. If that motion is seconded, we will have discussion. If someone makes a motion that is not seconded, we will not have a discussion. After we've had sufficient discussion, if someone wants to call the question, have a roll call vote. I think probably the place to start is what is item D on the paper that Bill sent us over the weekend. I think the most important thing is to figure out where are we starting and moving from. And so the way I see it, we have three possible starting places. We could start with the PR district as it has been amended since our other work sessions. We could start with that. We could start with the central residential district as it is proposed and work from that. Or we could start with, for lack of a more creative word, the Phipps Dennis plan, which seems to encompass some of the elements of both, or at least a compromise between the two. So does anyone have a motion as to what they think would be a good starting place?
President,
Yes.
I think if we were to go with page 3 of this, it compares and contrasts the differences between the citizen CR and the Phipps Dennis plan. So if we went through systematically through the 17 differences between those two plans, that would arrive us at some point. The advantage to that is it's outlined right here. The disadvantage is it doesn't include those items that were common between those two plans, and it doesn't directly reference the PR district. So I guess I'd say let's go with going through the differences between the citizens CR and the Phipps Dennis plan, and just see. Maybe there'll be a mixture by the time we're done. But that's just, I want to stress, that's one approach.
Suggestions?
President, if you want a motion, I'll move to adjust the pedestrian residential district use table in accordance with the table dated March 7th and provided to you in an email in that date. It's also, I think it's in the packet that you just handed out, correct? I have not found it yet.
Second that.
Oh, maybe it's not.
But it's definitely in the packet from March 13th, if y'all have that one. Or it's definitely in your email on March 7th.
Right, that's what we're looking at here.
President,
Yes.
would you like me to summarize the changes I'm proposing to make?
Sure.
All right, so I propose removing several uses altogether from the pedestrian residential district, including corner store, bar, tavern, microbrewery and distillery, and retail sales. I believe these commercial uses represent the most intense commercial uses proposed in the district, and those commercial uses found most objectionable by many of the concerned citizens I have spoken with. And then I would also move several uses, those circled at the bottom of this table, so barber, beauty, spa, campus ministry, daycare center, and funeral home, from the permitted by right column to the conditional column.
So do I have a second to go ahead and make these changes outright, understanding that perhaps these are not the final changes, but these are changes to be made initially?
Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on why we should not make these initial changes?
Mr. President, if this is just a starting point to structure discussion, I have no problem with that.
Other discussion? Opposed to removing things? Okay, Jody, could you call the roll?
Dennis, Harold.
Yes.
Hollenbach.
Yes.
Odericio.
Yes.
Phipps.
Yes.
Rabando.
Okay, so these use changes have been made.
I would like to make a motion that now that we've adopted this use table for the PR district, I would like to make a motion that we keep zones R1, R2, and the pedestrian residential district, but we make the uses for these residential areas exactly the same. The standards will remain for R1, R2, and PR, but the uses would would be the exact same uses that we see right here. And the reason that I'm asking this is, if I may quote from the BG Independent, along the lingering questions is why the city is proposing zoning changes in older neighborhoods. If zoning changes will add to housing diversity and more walkable neighborhoods, then why aren't they being implemented in all residential areas of the city? And I agree with that. And that's exactly why I'm making this motion. And I know that, it's been said that we have to have different residential areas and they have to have different uses. And, I would point to the 1970s where we didn't really have a zoning code. And, I did a little bit of research myself. And according to the US Census Bureau in the 1970s, the percentage of renter occupied housing in Bowling Green, Ohio was 54%. And that, again, that's when we did not have an official zoning code. So everything was equal. And when we implemented our zoning code, which made a large section of our city only permit one-use dwellings or one-unit dwellings, the percentage of rental occupied units increased. So you may ask yourself, how did that happen? How exactly did that happen? Well, when you don't permit two-unit dwellings, you decrease the availability of affordable housing, because a duplex can be a fantastic starter home for someone to own. Instead of forcing more individuals to rent, two-unit dwellings can actually allow them to own an affordable home. And you might say to yourself, Nick, you're living in a fantasy world. These two-unit dwellings are only going to be used as rental properties, and that's fine. I understand that. But if we don't permit these two-unit dwellings, it will reduce the availability of accessible rental units. And you may say to yourself, great, we don't want more rental units in the city. But I've done a lot of thinking about this over this time. And I think, what does that actually mean if we don't have as many rental units in the city? Well, when you reduce the amount of available rental units, you create an increased competition among renters. So what that means is a higher demand for higher rental prices, which means it's harder for residents to eventually buy a home. But, and here I think is where we get kind of to the crux of the issue that we've been kind of talking about and all the time. You know, what is an incentive for a landlord to fix up their dilapidated property if there's no other options available? So if I'm a landlord and I know that no matter how unsafe or unsavory my rental property has become, I can charge whatever rate I want and never fix a thing because someone is always going to rent that property. Right now, the demand is really high, but the supply is low. And I know this because I'm a renter and I have a very hard time finding suitable, affordable properties. So if we permit these 2-unit dwellings everywhere in the city equally, it will increase the supply of quality rental units and force landlords to offer a better product. And together with the enforcement of the rental inspection legislation that we've already passed, I think we can actually solve the issue that's plaguing the city. So the reason I'm submitting this is I think, you know, by treating all these residential areas the same, you know, you share the responsibility through the entire community. So I believe this plan promotes freedom, it promotes equality, and it promotes progress. So again, that would just be keeping the standards the same for R1, R2, and PR, but using the exact same uses for all 3 of those districts, which we would find right here.
So Nick, you're saying standards, when you say standards the same, standards as standards in the most recent February 2023 draft.
Yes.
So standards in each of those zones and districts are different.
Yes.
But the use table looks like the use table we just adopted for the PR district.
Yes.
Okay.
Because then we are not singling out the PR district when we're talking about creating walkable neighborhoods with a variety of affordable housing.
Okay. So then we also have,
Oh, wait a minute. I have a novel idea.
oh,
Why don't we have a second
Yeah, Mr.
before we have
President.
discussion?
You said that you wanted to have formal procedures. There's nothing to discuss unless there's a second.
oh, sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
So
I was just trying to understand what I would be or
Councilman
not be
Urbando
seconding.
has made a motion. Is the motion seconded?
I will second the motion.
All right, now you may ask your
Um,
questions.
Give me a moment. Did we vote on we did vote on the adoption of these?
So we just applied this to the
Great.
PR district.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. President?
Yes.
So then there's 2 other zones and districts left, primarily residential zones left in the code, which are R3 and university-oriented
Mhm.
residential. You're not proposing to make any changes there?
So those 2 have multi-unit dwellings, and I do not think that multi-unit dwellings would fit in R1, R2, or PR. As the use tables already suggest in those.
Any other discussion?
Can you, I have to confess that I am a bit,
Sure, I completely understand.
we could highlight the changes that will happen to R1, R2 to comply with the uses that you just.
Of course. The biggest changes that I see in this, it would add 2-unit dwellings to R1. And then it would, that's really about it. The other thing that honestly I see, which, I'm open to talking about, but currently, right now, in R1, there is a conditional use for mobile home park. That is not in this use table. So that conditional use for R1, I suppose it would be stripped out, but I'm open to talking about that.
President?
Yep.
That is something we're definitely going to address later. That's on Heather's list of to-do items. She's proposing to rename that and add that in all 5 zones and districts.
Okay, great. So that would actually already be happening.
Mr. President, Nick, so if you look at the table that I sent on the 7th that we just adopted for the PR district,
Mhm.
everything that has one asterisk, I mean, I think this is all right, but everything that I think it's all still right, but everything that has one asterisk is allowed by right or conditionally already in all 5 residential zones or districts. So a lot of this stuff, adult group homes, parking pads, 1-unit dwellings, churches, schools, daycares are already permitted in all zones and districts.
So it's a very little change is what you're trying to say.
No, I don't think it's a I don't think it's a really little change. But the things in play are not all of them. Retail services, I mean, on quick look, I mean, we just got this, so I'm a little flat footed, but professional offices, retail services, 2-unit dwellings, ADUs are conditional in some places, permitted in some. ADUs are currently allowed in all 3 of those zones and districts, but they're permitted in R1 and conditional in PR and R2. Retail services, beauty, barber, spa, that's new. Funeral homes. Were you going to say something, Jeff?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I think I'm done for now. Joel, did you have
And
anything?
I completely understand. I apologize that this was submitted so late. I was gathering as much information as I could have about this. I didn't want to put this out without really thinking hard about it and making sure that it was the right proposal. So, again, we had our meeting on Thursday. All of us have other jobs. We all know this. It's not, I wish I could spend my entire day doing all of this stuff, but unfortunately I can't. So that was the soonest I was able to get it out in a position that I felt extremely comfortable, where it wasn't going to put the city in any harm, but also do a lot of good. And, I think that there's been a lot of individuals who have expressed some concern as to why we're focusing in on solely the PR district and why we're making these changes in only the PR district. And I'm saying, you're right. Let's do this throughout the entire city. I think this is a good move for us. This will increase affordable housing, which we've talked about, and it will create walkable neighborhoods, which we've talked about.
I agree with what Nick has said. I also agree with what Rachel has said, though it seems that it is just simply not the case that we have singled out this area. This table is still accurate. I don't think we.
No, yeah, yes, the table's accurate.
As noted down here at the bottom, I mean, anything with one asterisk next to it is allowed in all 5 residential zones. So it's just simply not the case that we are not addressing this need in other areas as well. So I think what you said, Nick, actually, that this is a relatively minor change is probably more on point where I'm at. Does seem, looking at the use table and this list here, that this would be a very slight change. Would make a compelling case that everything that we have sat here talking about, all of these values apply citywide. So.
As was mentioned at the meeting last week, I believe that the concern that people had expressed multiple times, that how come this PR isn't being implemented throughout the city, wasn't meant to say, let's spread the joy. I think it was meant to say, what's different between these different areas, and if we're going to be subjected to it, why shouldn't the other areas be subjected to it? And I think that's a basic fork in the road in terms of looking at it as and I'm speaking about the PR, that either you think the PR district is not a very good idea, and why is a certain area of the city being punished by it? Why not punish everyone? Versus why are we being treated so royally when everybody else should have this? And I think that I feel confident that the people that are opposing the PR are not making the argument that it should be expanded. I think they're making the argument that it shouldn't be implemented at all. Now that's the PR, and of course we are not. That's not what we had the motion on. It was on the compromise from the PR. But I don't see this as something that is appropriate for the rest of the city. And I don't think that it's what the citizens want either.
Why isn't it appropriate?
Mr. President,
Go ahead.
I heard them expressly ask for it to be applied across the city. I was there at the meeting.
I
They
think
were
it-
very vocal.
I think it was intended to be sarcastic.
Well, they should be careful about what they're asking for. I heard them ask for it across the city.
Mr. President,
Yep.
we have heard from quite a few citizens that altogether make up about 2% of the city. So I guess I would just urge everybody to maybe weigh some of these pros and cons independent of some of the feedback that we have heard thus far. I don't think it is accurate to say that we have heard from the city. I think also that Nick did a very nice job addressing some of Bill's concerns early on when he said that limiting supply is going to lower competition. What that's going to do is raise prices and lead to, one, rental property being a more lucrative option in the city of Bowling Green, which in theory would lead to the conversion of more properties into rental properties. I think it's also gonna, well, we've done it, right? And we've seen the product that has often resulted in generic zoning policies that we have had for decades now. What we have been doing has got us to here, and people that I have talked to recently don't seem very happy with where we're at right now.
Question on Jody, could you call the roll?
Harold,
No,
Hollenbaugh,
No.
Odericio,
Yes.
Phipps,
No.
Robinette,
No.
Urbando,
Yes.
Dennis.
Yes.
Okay, so was that 4-3 no?
Yeah.
Thank you for the suggestion.
I tried.
President? Since we have as our standard to work from, the Phipps Dennis plan or whatever, and I really don't like that title because I have a great deal of respect for Rachel and Jeff. And if I vote for something that's contrary to what that is, I don't want it to be personal.
It's not personal. Do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, I did. I was working my way toward it.
Time is of the essence.
Then we're in trouble. Page 3, I think that what I'm going to end up doing is going through, I think D1 probably isn't much of an issue, but with D2 through D17, again, if you look at page 3, A is what the citizens recommended, and B is what we currently have because of what we voted on about 10 minutes ago. So I'm going to make motions for each of these for option A. In effect, what I'm doing is saying, all right, this is the Rachel Jeff plan. What about changing that particular item to be what the citizens recommended? So that's the game plan. I guess the best way is to go systematically, and obviously if there's no second, I'll move on to the next one.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, thank you. D.2, maximum height in feet. What we just passed has 35 feet, and what the citizens had, we'll say the CR district, 40 feet. So I move that we change the maximum height from 35 feet to 40 feet.
Mr. President?
Yeah.
I'd like to ask why Why?
We don't
We're
discuss
not in
unless we have
discussion
a
at the
second.
moment.
If this is something you're interested in, second it and we'll discuss it. If it's something you don't feel you could support, then. All right, Bill, we're moving on.
All right, thank you, sir. D3, maximum lot coverage. What we just passed a few minutes ago is 80%. And what the CR proposal is 60%. So I move that we change the maximum lot coverage from 80% to 60%.
Second.
Okay, it's properly moved and seconded. Discussion?
I think a lot of individuals have expressed concern over the 80% and what that would cause. I understand that there has been a lot of confusion around what this number actually represents. And I understand that the 80% reflects more of what the neighborhood looks like currently after surveying has been done. But I do think that this has been a pretty big sticking point for a lot of the individuals concerned. So I think it's important that.
Any other discussion on this?
Heather, did we get a final ruling on whether lot coverage would lead to an increase in properties, or is lot coverage not something that would trigger that provision?
You can sit next to Jody.
Sorry, I felt like a lot of time wasted there. So that's not something we would calculate until someone gets a permit. It's just, that's the tool we use. Does that help? Okay.
Well, so if I wanted to, if I pulled a permit for an unrelated modeling, doing my garage, and you noticed that my lot coverage was over 60%, as many homes are, including a lot of folks we've heard from, frankly. Is that something that you would notice, flag, and then now I'm a legal non-conforming property that needs to go through?
Depending on the project, you'd have to get a variance. So if you wanted to add to your house and it increases that lot coverage, yes, you'd have to get a variance.
Okay, even if I wanted to put up a fence though, and you happen to notice that I'm at 70% lot coverage.
No, because a fence doesn't trigger lot coverage. Correct.
Any other discussion on this? Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I do have another question for you. You could probably just nod. If somebody wants to, if somebody needs to add an accessibility ramp, would that impact lot coverage?
It says that expressly in the code too. No,
Great, thank
it's
you.
not just how they handle it. It's in the code.
Okay. Any other thoughts? All right. So this is a vote to change from what is currently 80% to 60%. Jody?
Hollenbaugh,
No.
Odericio,
Yes.
Phipps,
No.
Robinette,
No.
Urbando,
Yes.
Dennis,
No.
Harold. Is
Yes.
that a yes?
I'm sorry, yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, that did not pass by a 3-4 vote. So D4,
Well, Mr. President,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, Bill, but I would support decreasing the maximum lot coverage from 80% to 70%.
I'll second that. All right, so now the discussion is A.5, 70% instead of 80 or 60. Is there any discussion on that?
think that's a very strong compromise. I appreciate you making that suggestion, Rachel. Yeah, I will also be in favor of that.
Anything else? Jody?
Mauricio,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Urbando,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh.
Yes. Okay, so that has been changed to 70%.
D4, accessory dwelling unit. Currently, as we passed earlier, it's conditional, and the citizen CR has it as not permitted. All right, so I move that we change it from conditional to not permitted. Barber shop, beauty shop, day spa. The proposal that we passed earlier tonight has it as conditional. The citizen CR is not permitted. I move that we change it to not permitted.
Okay, do I have a second?
Six, bed and breakfast. Passed earlier has permitted. The citizen CR has not permitted. I move that we change it to not permitted.
Second on the motion.
President, I would make a motion to change it to conditional.
I would second that if the motion we just made didn't get a second.
Sounded like it did.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so we have a new motion is to change bed and breakfast from a permitted use to a conditional use. And that has been moved by Nick and seconded by Bill. Discussion on that.
President,
Yes.
I think there are already, and when I say I think, there are already several conditions baked into the definition of bed and breakfast, which is something that I think that we have really done a good job clarifying throughout this process. A bed and breakfast is already required to be owner occupied. It's already required to be a 1-unit dwelling, which means it's limited to 5 rooms, although there's some ambiguity that we need to clean up. Rented on a nightly, weekend, or weekly basis. It needs to be the owner's / operator's primary residence. It is already regulated in many or most of the ways that have been suggested, I think, to this body by various people. I guess I think that it is already sufficiently conditioned and would not have a problem leaving it as permitted with the understanding conditions are going to be enforced.
Any other discussion on bed and breakfast?
Mr. President, I agree completely with Jeff, but I also would be more comfortable with the added protection of having it be conditional.
President,
Yes.
I'll just add that it's at the specific conditions that Jeff referenced are at 150.49. He didn't mention that fire chief or their designee has to review an application for a bed and breakfast. And I think I might have missed another one or two. There's A through F, but 150.49.
I'd say that bed and
President?
breakfasts
Yeah.
are the most strictly regulated.
Mr. President, I would say in light, I did forget about the fire chief who has to approve any bed and breakfast that is, and I think that that is almost stronger than conditional use. I mean, I guess it would still have to go through that process anyways. But I mean, in the, for time's sake, I'm gonna resend my.
Okay. Carnations of bed and breakfast. Okay, moving on to 7.
Well, I guess, Mr. President, I would take that opportunity to move that we adjust the definition of bed and breakfast. At one spot, we've got it as 8 bedrooms. At another spot, based on the definition of one unit dwelling, it is set at 5. I would move that we make it so that the code consistently limits it to 5 bedrooms.
Second.
Um,
Properly moved in second.
Nick, when you made your comment, were you withdrawing your second?
I actually made the motion to,
Oh, yeah, that's right. So
yeah,
you,
so I'm rescinding the motion.
okay.
All right, so Jeff has made a motion that we fix the contradiction between 8 and 5 bedrooms to make bed and breakfast in 5 bedrooms. Seconded. Discussion on this.
That's not more than 5.
Well, Mr. President?
Yes.
So we're talking about 150.49D. So the definition of one unit bedroom, or excuse me, one unit dwelling in the glossary limits a one unit dwelling to 5 bedrooms.
Yes.
Check that real quick, Jeff. But D says a maximum of 8 rented bedrooms are permitted. But the the primary residence of the property owner, the proprietor, that would be a bedroom. So are you
Would be
are we
4 for rent.
limiting the rented bedrooms to 4? Is that the consistent, the more
Yes, I
consistent
would
way to handle?
not, I would not create a carve out for one unit dwelling. I would limit it to 5 bedrooms total. One of them needs to be occupant is,
You would change D to 4. 150, it's on page 56.
yes, I would change it so that the definition on page 118 is the definition.
Discussion.
If it already specifies that it's no more than 8 rented bedrooms, I don't feel that that is a contradiction.
The only reason that I would feel strongly that it is a contradiction is because I cleared it with Heather and Nolan prior to this meeting, and there was some discussion that was had, but ultimately Nolan, who was the one that drafted this, felt that it was an ambiguity that we needed to address.
Any other conversation? Jody?
Phipps,
I'm sorry. Can you restate the motion just so I'm super clear?
I move that the definition of bed and breakfast, 150.49, found on page 56, is amended so that it is consistent with the definition on, I believe, page 118 of one unit dwelling.
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Romando,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Voter Seal.
Yes.
Right, moving along and paying no attention to the trend that is developing here. D7, daycare center, 5 or more children. The earlier passed motion had that as conditional, and the citizen CR has it as not permitted. So I move that we change daycare center, 5 or more children from conditional to not permitted.
Eight.
Mortuary or funeral home, what we passed earlier has it as conditional, and the citizen CR has it as not permitted. Point 9, nursing home, what was passed earlier has it as conditional. The citizen CR has it as not permitted.
Second.
About nursing homes.
I think that, Mr. President, nursing homes, the nursing homes that I have been to and my common, tend to be single-story buildings. They tend to be places require a lot of parking, where the people who live there are not, while they are active, typically it's on site. what we are going for is neighborhoods that are more walkable or more walkable neighborhoods. It seems like a nursing home would probably be better suited to another area of the community.
Nursing home.
President,
Yes.
I would just point out that nursing homes are permitted in R3. They're permitted in commercial, they're permitted in institutional, they're permitted in university-oriented residential, and they're also permitted in the central residential district. So they are permitted, it seems to me, in a fair amount of zones and districts, nearly half.
I guess they don't need to be in this area, huh?
Is there anything on the books that prevents us from excluding nursing homes from a given area? I know that that's a factor to consider with some of these uses.
Heather's shaking her head no. And the nursing homes they're permitted in R3, conditional in pedestrian residential, and permitted in university-oriented residential, but they're not an allowed use in R1 or R2. Kind of
Just-
helpful to know the lay of the
It
land.
is, it's just funny to think about a nursing home in the middle of the.
Oh, okay, well.
I mean, there are some
Any other
size parcels over there that
other thoughts on nursing homes?
Yeah, I would just like to point out, it says in the definition, that the minimum lot area shall be 12,000 square feet. 10 beds plus 1,000 square feet. First 10 occupants.
Right, which goes to what Jeff was saying.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I just pointing out the size
Oh.
there.
Yeah, okay. I guess in an effort to be consistent with my prior statements, which I've advocated for, I will withdraw that motion then. That is sufficiently limited and I'm hard pressed to think of a spot where that would happen in PR.
I was actually agreeing with you.
Oh, I mean, I don't think we're gonna find okay.
I mean, I agree. I do not think we would find an area really that would encompass, but I mean, that also makes sense to me why it would not be included in that area.
Well, I guess I'm thinking more in order to make the financials work out on a nursing home, I think a 10-bed nursing home is probably never
Not
going to
not
happen.
gonna happen. Yeah.
I mean, we can have a vote on it. We'll press on.
I call the question.
Did you withdraw or not?
Joel's called the question.
But
Nope,
did
we'll
you
go forward.
withdraw?
I did not.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Jody, nursing homes.
Robinette,
This is to change it to not permitted, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Urbando,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Odericio,
Yes.
Phipps.
Yes.
Probably quit now. D point 10, and I'm not going to make a motion here, just a statement, and that is place of worship, religious assembly, and campus ministry. It's currently, as we passed earlier, conditional, and the Citizen CR district had it as not permitted, and I'm a bit concerned that these uses are probably federally protected. So I myself am not going to make a motion to change it from conditional to not permitted. But I just wanted to point that out just to be consistent.
Second, Bill's non-motion.
We all do.
I will second Bill's non-motion.
All right, D11, professional offices. Currently, we have it as permitted, and the Citizen CR has it as not permitted. So I move that we change it from permitted to not permitted.
Okay,
I'll second that.
moved and seconded. Discussion on professional offices.
I think since COVID, with so many people working from home, that I would be opposed to this. And frankly, I don't like the idea of limiting what people property. So I'm opposed to this.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Mr. President, I'll preface my comments, I guess, by saying that I work in an office that's adjacent to at least one property. Not sure how many units are in it, I guess. We've also got the Public Defender's Office. We have several professional offices scattered throughout the community that seem to work very well. And if I had to guess, I would say the reason for that is because they tend to be 9 to 5. If I am seeing clients at my professional office in a neighborhood, I am probably keeping up with the landscaping. I'm placing the siding if it starts to look like it's in rough condition, adequately maintaining the property. There is presumably no traffic during the hours of the day when neighbors are home. I really can't understand why you would not want a professional office in your neighborhood, actually.
Discussion on professional offices. Jody?
Bando,
No.
Ennis,
No.
Harold,
No,
Hollenbaugh,
No.
Odericio,
No.
Phipps,
No.
Robinette.
No.
President, so it doesn't change. I move that we change professional offices from permitted to conditional. Right. Retail services, I would imagine we would have a similar discussion, but what we passed earlier tonight has it as conditional. The citizen CR has it as not permitted. So I would move that we change it from conditional to not permitted. D13, school primary or secondary. What we passed earlier has conditional, and the citizen CR has it as not permitted. So I move that we change it from conditional to not permitted for primary or secondary schools. Fourteen, school vocational and training. What we passed earlier is conditional. Citizen CR district has not permitted. I move that we change it from conditional to not permitted. Let's skip 15 for a minute. D16, type A family daycare home 4 to 12. What we passed earlier has it as conditional. The citizen CR has it as not permitted. I move that we change type A family daycare home ages 4 to 12 from conditional to not permitted.
4 to 12 students.
Yeah, 4 to, I'm sorry, 4 to 12 students. My bad. D17, type B family daycare home, 1 to 6. What we passed earlier has it as conditional. Citizen CR has it as not permitted. I move that we change it from conditional to not permitted.
Okay.
All right, back to D15. 2-unit dwelling. What we passed earlier has it as permitted. The citizen CR has it as not permitted. So I move that we change 2-unit dwelling from permitted to not permitted.
President?
Yep.
I am not going to second this because I
Then
am,
we can't have a discussion.
speak.
Can't pontificate unless we're discussing something.
Second it so you can say why.
All right. Been properly moved and seconded.
So Nick, why are you not seconding it?
I do not plan to support this because I have had somewhat of a change of heart, but I do plan on making a motion to add 2-unit dwellings to R1 to show that I believe that 2-unit dwellings are actually helpful in the PR district and ultimately
if done right with our code enforcement that we've already passed, will help go after these delinquent properties.
President? I guess I would add to that, I'm a homeowner now, but very recently, up until about 5 years ago, was renting in Bowling Green. All four wards of the city, and I will tell you that I have lived next to several large homes, some which were broken up into smaller units, some which were not. The type of renter, I think in my experience, that I have found renting a large 6 or 7 bedroom house is much different than the one renting a triplex, for example, a 1 bedroom unit in that same size house. So there are a lot of negative externalities that can come with density. There's no doubt about it, and we've heard a lot about it. Um, Banning duplexes is not a great way to get at a lot of those negative externalities. Certainly not the most direct way. So yeah, if you've got a large home next door, nobody is saying, there's nothing saying that that can't be a rental property. What you're saying is that it cannot be a small rental property. I don't know that that necessarily is the best way to get at a lot of the concerns that we have heard from many people over the years, frankly.
I would also say that Jeff makes a very good point. Just because a house can't be made into a two-unit dwelling doesn't mean that it can't be a rental property.
If you're an R1, you can live next to a large home full of, rambunctious college students who are hosting parties every weekend. Simply saying, no, this is a single family dwelling does not mean that it is going to be a single nuclear family living there.
All right, so just so I'm clear, what we're talking about here is a motion to change 2-unit dwelling from permitted to not permitted.
Ennis? Harold?
Yes.
Hollenbaugh?
No.
Dericio?
No.
Phipps?
No.
Robinette?
Yes.
Urbando?
No.
So, Mr. President, I move that we change 2-unit dwelling from permitted to conditional.
Okay.
President?
Yep.
I propose a motion to add 2-unit dwellings to the use table in R1 as permitted.
Second.
Oh, boy, you just barely made it. Discussion.
Mr. President, this is a tough decision, I think, and Frank, I probably will end up supporting it today, but it is something that I plan to take some time looking at over the next several weeks. I mean, this is not going to be our last meeting on this, so
Right.
while I will support putting it in there now, I don't know that I would support leaving it there, and maybe I would move to change it back later. I think it's something worth considering. I'd like to look at. I'd just like to take a closer look at it and spend some time thinking about how it's gonna work.
That's kind of how I feel about 2-unit dwellings in general. We have even up till the night this receives its third reading and gets voted on, an option to make changes. And that's kind of where I am at. I would just like to be able to think about this more.
I would think that you could use the same arguments to vote no now, because you could possibly vote yes later.
Well, I may vote no now.
I mean-
I'm not saying.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would like to say that the first home I owned was a 2-unit, and I could afford it because I rented out the bottom of my own home. So I think a responsibly built duplex is a 2-unit home, and I live in a neighborhood full of beautiful. I think that it's a viable housing option. I don't see why we should eliminate that as a housing option in any parts of our city.
President, I want to echo what Joel said, except perhaps the very end. First house that my wife and I owned was a legal duplex, and we were able to buy it because we could afford it, renting out the back and living in the front. But I still I'm not in favor of the 2-unit in R1. Even though I had that experience, because it depends on what part of town. So
Any other discussion on,
Mr. President,
yes,
Bill, where do you live in the zone?
where do I live now, or
Yeah.
when I bought the house?
Where do you live now?
I live on Conneaut.
So that would be in this plan zoning?
It is not. Oh, the first house I bought was on Conneaut.
So
It
it's not
was-
in R1?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's in R1.
Okay, thank you.
President?
yep.
I'm certainly happy to think about this too, Nick, but I don't intend to support it tonight. I mean, I think we can't lose sight of the fact that, you know, we take the time to comprehensively plan as a community with all the public engagement and stakeholder involvement and time and funding that that requires, so we can reach consensus around a shared vision for our city. And so aligning our zoning code with those planning documents really protects that planning process. And very clearly in our future land use plan, R1 is mapped on areas that are called suburban single-family residential. So that really does give me pause. I think there's, you know, I hear you. I think that you make a compelling argument, and I'm happy to think about it some more. But I mean, we do all this planning, so our city is not at the whim of elected officials that, you know, are on the ballot every 2 years. So I appreciate you thinking long and hard about this, but I just can't support that tonight.
I completely understand that. And I think that putting it in there, thinking about it, I mean, we can always change it. I mean, one, there's, you know, possible trailer parks could be put in R1. So you know, single family zoning.
Okay.
Yeah, I know it will be discussed.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, it's tough to say like, this is great for the PR district, but bad everywhere else. I just don't understand that argument. And I think that's what a lot of people are out here are saying, that they don't understand that argument. And what I'm saying is that I think that 2-unit dwellings are actually good for the PR district. And I think that they would be good everywhere else. I really don't think that this would cause too much of a problem. And if we hear it, you know, we can maybe do something about it. Maybe we can make a change when the time comes. But I think the problem is, and from what I'm understanding from a lot of people, is if we're saying that 2-unit dwellings will make a positive impact in the PR district, why do they not make a positive impact everywhere else?
Well, Mr. President, I mean, whether it has been adequately communicated or not, there are endless benefits to having more people living in close proximity to a vibrant downtown. So if we are going to increase density in an area, I think there's a very strong argument for making it as close to the economic center of our community as possible. Now, I will grant that that is, I think, probably at times been lost in translation or been lost in this conversation, but a huge part of this, one of the main benefits is what it will mean to have more people living and working in and around downtown Bowling Green. That's where our local businesses are located. That is where people want to get to. There are a lot of benefits to having people with improved access to those areas. That said, I also think that we do have a lot of challenges when it comes to housing affordability, housing quality, particularly among rentals. So there are a lot of benefits to having options elsewhere, but those are especially true. That is especially true in and around the downtown area.
Okay, well, I think we've heard views on this, so I'm going to call the question. Jody?
Harold,
No.
Hollenbaugh,
No.
Odricio,
No.
Phipps,
No.
Robinette,
No.
Fernando,
Yes.
Dennis.
Yes.
Takes us through those differences.
Yeah.
Where we go next, Bill?
What would someone, let someone else have a turn.
Sure.
Mr. President?
Yeah.
I would like to make a motion to task the zone code, with creating a new zone using the proposal dated March 7th that I provided to you guys by email on that date. Zone code's work will include creating building design standards for the new zone and adjusting the remaining code as necessary to incorporate the new zone. I'll ask for a second.
Second.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any discussion on having this new drafted?
Just to clarify, are we talking about this?
Yes.
Okay. And so by voting in favor of this, we are creating the new zone?
We're creating a new zone. It's, Heather is going to walk us through where the administration is proposing to stick the new zone. So we can talk about that before or after, but yes, I'm just making the motion to create the new zone. Then we got to talk about where to put it.
And also whether to have any of the provisions different,
Oh, yeah, of course.
which ends up being Part E. 26 different components, 50 different components.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Are we talking about for the new zone? It's got all the provisions of the new zone. So would we go through each of these or just take it as, okay, yeah, that's cool?
I think what we'll do is we'll take it as that's cool or not cool. To
all
change
it.
a specific thing, we will, but I don't want to go through each item.
I don't know why. Okay.
So
She is going to propose spots to stick the new zone. If you would like to talk through that now.
or do you want to wait until we decide if we even want a new zone?
I think that that's cleaner.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to create this zone in the document dated March 7th.
Mr. President, again, and correct me if I'm wrong, which is always the case, Rachel, but diplomatic. The motivation for the new zone is if we don't have a new zone, then it would basically default to a proposed commercial zone or industrial zone, which being areas that generally are close to neighborhoods would probably not fit very well. So the new zone's intent is to tailor make, if you will, and restrict in a sense what can go in this kind of commercial industrial where we already have commercial industrial, so that it fits better with the neighborhoods, the residential that's close by. Is that the essence of it?
Yeah, I think the new zone is a better fit for these existing spots that are smack in the middle of our neighborhoods. The uses, I mean, I can give you a quick description of what we did. You know, right now under our current zoning code, dotted throughout the neighborhood surrounding downtown, there are spots of mostly B2 commercial or M1 light industrial or some other level of commercial or industrial zoning. So zone code proposed to zone all of those spots commercial in the new zoning code, the same commercial as Walmart and Kroger on the north and south ends of town. And so I'm not proposing to change any of the boundaries of these spots. I'm only proposing to create a new zone that would treat those spots differently. So we, Jeff Dennis, the mayor, Lori, Heather, and ZoneCo, worked backward from the proposed commercial to build the proposal for the new zone. The big differences are where the proposed commercial zone allows many auto-oriented uses by right, the new zone would not. Proposed commercial allows retail centers, which are defined as commercial establishments located in a single structure of a minimum size of 100,000 square feet. The new zone would get rid of that use altogether. In proposed commercial, bars and taverns, microbreweries and distilleries are permitted by right. The new zone would make these uses conditional. Proposed commercial does not allow any residential uses, and I propose permitting 1, 2, and multi-unit dwellings in the new zone. I also suggest we create architectural design standards to help ensure that any new development or substantial redevelopment will add value to the surrounding neighborhood without detracting from the area aesthetically. And so I think this is a good fit for lots of reasons. One of the goals of our zoning code update process is to make the code more forward-looking. And I think adding residential uses to the new zone can make the transition between these primarily commercial blocks and primarily residential blocks more pleasant and seamless over the next few decades. And I also believe that this residential piece adds some flexibility for owners in this area. I can imagine existing structures being reused for commercial and residential purposes. That's my pitch.
President?
Yep.
I think that, and again, we can, hopefully not tonight, quibble with specific uses. But the general approach that was used to take what could be uses of potential future uses that would disrupt the neighborhood and tailor make it so that it's fits better. In essence, kind of approaching a PR type of a district from the opposite end. Instead of starting with residential and putting commercial in it, you're taking commercial, restricting it, revising it so that it fits, and then also throwing in the possibility of residential. I think it's a good idea. It improves our zoning. It's very pragmatic. And again, there may be certain things that I may take issue with, but the approach I think is very good. A great example, I mentioned it the other day, was the minimum setback for the side yard. If there's a business or commercial next to it, the setback's 0, but if it's a residence, it's 10 feet. I think that's a great example of what you were trying to accomplish. And so again, without giving a approval of each of these items, of which there are many, I think the idea is spot on. And so thanks for all that work that you all have done. I would quibble with the name of it, though. I think that new zone should be changed to something else.
I'm sure it will. Is there anyone that wishes to speak cautionary of this idea?
I call the question.
Okay, Jody,
Hollenbaugh,
yes.
Odericio,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Urbando,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold.
Yes.
Okey-dokey.
Mr. President, would it be possible to have everybody talk about stuff that's not important while I go to the restroom?
Well, I think Heather's going to show us a map.
So no.
Or walk us through a map.
Thank you. One, two, if you want to do that. Oh, yeah, this is new. You want a new one?
I want to do
Yeah.
words.
I have an extra one.
Sure, go ahead.
Am I to wait for Bill or? Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna stand here to make it easier to go through this. So, No, that's okay. So Rachel asked that as administration, we look at where the new zone could be useful. And basically looking at the neighborhood areas where our comp plan calls for more mixed use and walkability. And so we started with areas that, so like page one, we talked about, one thing is on there, Hannah Law Office. That was originally part of the PR. So I don't know, that's just something where I don't know if you prefer that it would stay within the PR or consider this. It's not a very big spot. The old Sentinel area, that really has sat vacant for a long time. Another idea, Dill and Main Street there, we circled that. That actually would be though legal non-conforming because it is auto-oriented towing and some repair there. Again, no zoning codes, one size fits all. We also looked at where the old Newman's Marathon is. There is an insurance office and then some space behind there that's retail. That could be another area surrounding the neighborhood there. We also circled the Conneaut North Maple area where we already have, again, some of the commercial, the salon, Long's Cleaners, so that area. And then also we circled Campus Poly Eyes where that's at. You'll see that little pink there with the red circle. That seemed like that could be. It's adjacent to the Gateway. Might make sense, might make more sense as Gateway, but again, it just seemed like an opportunity with neighborhood around there.
I have a quick question. If professional offices are permitted, as I recall they are, Hannah Law Office could just stay.
Correct, yes. And with a lot of the unknowns, we weren't really sure, honestly, what to circle and not, depending on that outcome. So obviously a big area would be South Maple, Hankey, Eberly. A lot of that area that runs north-south on the next map is, as Rachel said, M1 light industrial and B2 commercial. So it seemed like that whole area really is an opportunity to use the new zone. And it's large enough where you could make some impacts there of some buildings that maybe are, aging, and that could be, again, an opportunity. We also circled the former South Main School, again, surrounded by neighborhood on South Main Street. Seemed like that could be an opportunity for, again, some flexibility there between residential and the commercial. And then we looked at there's currently storage units and a rental office on Lehman and near the railroad tracks. And I think we could consider that with a new zone, but additionally, there's also houses in a church. So I don't know if you could look at that whole area or just think about that being something different than the R3 currently on the map. It's just something that popped up that we thought maybe that should be cleaned up. So on page 3, we looked at the former Klotz Flower spot where there's actually quite a bit of property and a carryout across the street on South College and Napoleon. We thought there's some opportunity there. It's a pretty large space to do something there. And again, it would be neighborhood serving potentially and allow some residential.
I have a question about that. Like, a lot of these areas that are on this map are currently commercial, but Lotz's is not currently commercial.
It actually is, I believe, 2 different zoning classifications. So we just use the proposed zoning map that we have on our website that actually has it as innovation and employment zone. And we thought, well, this seems like it'd be a better fit for that surrounding area with the residential there than the actual, really, it's industry basically, right? The IE. So it seemed like it's even a better fit for that area. It's kind of a blank slate right now.
So that whole lot isn't agricultural.
No, I believe it's commercial and I can't remember the back half. And it's even more property than this. It's actually that whole pink area or salmon colored. It's actually zoned all agricultural and that's part of Klotz too. But we thought, let's just focus on what the current zoning is on the proposed map and focus on that specific area. Certainly in the future, if somebody wanted to do a zoning change, they could look at the agricultural portion.
If, could you help me with the what is it? The blue is institutional.
The blue is innovation and employment zone.
Oh, I see it. What uses would that allow?
That basically replaced our 3 industrial districts that we currently have, but it does allow a little bit of commercial and industrial.
I guess that seems like it's kind of in the middle of.
Well, so what you're saying is you've identified probably taking that into consideration, you've identified it for the new zone so that it's more residential.
Correct.
and
We thought it was a
I
good
I
opportunity.
prefer to see it as the new zone.
Yeah,
I
again,
think
it's
that's
just,
exact, I think you guys are saying the same thing. That
Okay,
was
thank
Heather's
you.
reasoning too, because it's in such a residential area, the new zone is probably more appropriate than I and E.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
yes, yes. We're trying to give you something to react to, I guess, starting point. In different areas in the city where it could be useful. So another area would be Ridgewood Drive. You know, that area is already pretty much all professional offices. I think we have yoga, we have the Sunday station, gas station, that, again, another idea where that could be the new zone. And lastly, on page 5, we looked at Poe and Haskins. So it would be that northwest corner that we saw some opportunity there. There's a lot of asphalt there. And there is an adjacent neighborhood that we thought that really could be a walkable area for, again, some additional opportunity with the new zone, along with to the south there on Haskins, where you do have some other professional offices. And then there's that, I don't know if it's called a carry out, where you can get some drinks there. So again, just some ideas to react to that we circled, so.
Okay.
Any questions?
Mayor Osbacher, did you want to jump in and say anything?
Thanks, Nick. I would say that generally, my priorities when we were considering this district are reflected in the proposal that you're considering. I do think that when you consider the previous uses that were permitted in these areas, primarily the existing M1, this is really a more appropriate zoning approach. So I do very much support this concept. And I think in terms of the location on the map, from my view, a more limited or perhaps incremental approach was appropriate at the beginning. This is new. We don't necessarily know what the interest level in this sort of development is going to be. We're kind of planting seeds for the future. And I think that if we approach this in a somewhat limited way at the beginning, it allows us to observe outcomes and react appropriately when we begin to see what type of impact this type of development would have on various parts of town.
So are you saying you're going to come forward with a specific recommendation for a more limited, or this is the limited?
No, I'm
use?
saying that I support, the zone and the map as it's been proposed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion made to adopt the map.
President, I move that we adopt the map that Heather walked us through.
Second,
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion on map? And
I mean, I think that Hannah Law Office should certainly just remain as part of the PR district. But I would maybe make that change later.
make that change now.
Okay,
I second that
Okay, so it's
motion.
been moved and seconded that the Hannah Law Office Building remain outside of this special zone. Discussion on that?
Can I, why are you making that motion?
It's a professional office and it's zone.
Professional office would also be permitted in,
Correct,
I
but,
think,
why carve out a special place for it?
following, but
Well, I mean, it's
The
one,
PR already, and the use is appropriate.
okay, yeah, I mean, yeah. Wondering what the,
okay. Any other thoughts on that, or can I have a vote?
Are we voting on that as an amendment, or
We
are
are.
we changing the adopt the map, except that?
We are voting to exclude that from,
Okay,
okay, so the vote is to exclude that. little oval from the map we are considering. Jody?
Odericio,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Rubando,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh.
Yes. Okay, so any other thoughts on the map? On the map?
And just to be clear, the oval is not really area, it's what it's surrounding. In other words, it surrounds something outside the
I have a question about what we are suggesting on page 2. Storage units and rental offices, I assume would be turned into the new zone. Are you suggesting that the houses and the church turn into the new zone, or that the houses and the church turn into the
Remain R3.
main R3?
Mhm.
Okay.
Church
Heather,
is, the
do you wanna
church
come
is
get-
circled.
Let's ask Heather. I'm just the brown is R3, correct, Heather?
Honestly, I was leaving it up to you. I was circling those as an area that could be. And then I noticed the houses in there and I thought, well, you might want to consider but again, up to you. I just thought it was an opportunity near the tracks.
But currently, just to be clear, in the February 2023 draft of the zoning map, the houses right there are zoned R3.
Correct, that whole area.
The church is
brown.
zoned R3, the storage units are zone 3, and the rental units.
Correct.
Okay.
So my point being, it needs to change to something, I
Mhm.
think.
And there was
that
this spot of light pink commercial.
Correct.
And so I like rezoning storage units, rental office, spot of existing commercial or proposed commercial. The I think the church could stay, or so it could stay in the residential, primarily residential R3. I don't feel strongly about that piece, but it feels like that funny spot of commercial in the middle of a neighborhood could probably be better served by the new zone. Anyone else have a reaction? I don't. we
I
need
will
to-
make a motion to include the
Wait.
storage units and the rental office in the new zone, along with the small pink area that already exists.
But not the houses or the church.
I would like to discuss those separately. I'll have another motion for that.
All right,
Just to clarify, this is the area immediately adjacent to the railroad tracks over
Correct.
there, right? Okay.
okay, well, I'll second Joel's motion that we include this new zone.
So, well, the motion was already to approve the map as,
We're making adjustments before we.
but it is already included in there. So your motion is to include that in the.
No, I think she
Exclude the church.
Yeah, what
So the motion then
exactly-
is to exclude the houses and the church.
Yes, you're right.
that we haven't dealt with the houses in the church yet.
The only difference is that yes, you're suggesting we exclude the church based on the
Yeah,
map. that's before us.
I guess what the motion is then would be, since we're assuming the things that are already highlighted are things that are going to be in it, unless someone removes them, are you suggesting we remove the church?
Well, I would suggest that we take the church and the houses and make them,
The houses aren't circled.
they are not circled, but I also I don't think they should stay as
The
R3.
issue on the table is this map. We can address that property after this map has been approved or disapproved.
I don't think, well,
Do you want to make a motion to remove the church, or do you want to leave it in?
I would like to, give me a second. My first motion was void.
Well, yeah, because
already
it's already
included
on
on
the
the
map.
map. I accept that. Thank you. So I make a motion that the R3 that includes the houses and the church on the map become PR district instead.
I think that, again, is an awkward place. We are entertaining a motion on this map.
Right.
Dealing with the change to this new district. Your motion makes sense, but it should come after we resolve this map issue.
Yeah, I think
Accept
the,
that. Thank you.
The active motion that's on the table needs to be finished first.
I think the only potential motion here in this is to remove the church from this new zone.
And I move to remove.
Been seconded. I think we've had plenty of discussion on this. Jody? This is to remove the church from the new zone.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Urbando,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes?
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Odericio.
Yes.
Okay, the church will be in some zoning classification, not this new one. Any other comments with regard to areas recommended for this new zoning classification?
Yes, Mr. President, and Heather, I will try to word it in a way that is a yes question so that you don't have to get up again. Was the reasoning for identifying Hannah Law Office as a potential area for this new zone, did it have anything to do with parking? Does parking over there exceed what would be permitted in the revised PR? So as adopted, he would become, well, okay, again, I'm just, okay. Yeah, no, you'd be surprised.
All right,
Fire and
everyone's
police.
happy with the adjustments made to the map. Should we have a vote? Okay, so we are voting to approve this map as we have amended it. Jody?
Robinette,
Yes.
Urbando,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Odericio,
Yes.
Phipps.
So, something else.
Mr. President? Back to, can we do some more?
What we're trying to do, Bill.
This thing. Reconstruction of damaged improvement.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, make a motion.
Cool. I direct your attention to page 2 of the 5-page document. At the bottom, item C, reconstruction of damaged improvements. What I would like to do is take a moment to read the current proposed zoning code, 150.88. Any non-conforming structure where 75% or more of its gross floor area above the foundation is damaged by fire, flood, explosion, earthquake, war, riot, or act of God or man shall not be reconstructed and used as before such casualty unless such construction and future use is in conformity with this zoning code. If less than 75% of the gross floor area is so damaged, it may be reconstructed or used, provided that such reconstruction or use is accomplished within 12 months of such casualty. A couple items related to that is, do we want to drop the provision? And I will make a motion in a second. If we don't want to drop that provision, 150.88, then perhaps some thought given to the percent or more of its gross floor area, and also the time frame. So I would like to make a motion, Mr. President, that we drop section 150.88, which is the reconstruction of damaged improvements. The implication is that if something happens, they can still, no matter how much is destroyed, they can still rebuild it to the way that it had been previously, regardless of whether it violates the current zoning.
Okay, looks like we're keeping the 75%.
Oh, no, the motion was to drop that. So apparently,
Looks like we're not dropping.
we're not dropping it. So, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that we change the 12 months to 24. And it says it may be reconstructed or used, provided that such reconstruction or use is accomplished within 12 months of such casualty. I think that, especially in today's times, of course, we don't know what it'd be like in the future, might be just too quick. And so I would move that we change it from 12 months to 24 months.
President, I have a question. How long are our building permits good for? 2 years?
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to change that from 12 to 24. No,
Mr. President, I have a clarifying question. If somebody begins construction within 12 months, would they be allowed to continue construction? Or does it have to be started and completed within 12 months? Yeah, but if that accomplished means that it gets started. I mean, you know.
where we live in a world with supply chain issues.
Right.
Well, not only that, but if somebody gets their reconstruction 90% done, but we hit 24 months and it's not completely finished.
So 150.88 says, provided that such reconstruction or use is accomplished within 12 months of such casualty. So I would say it has to be accomplished.
Finished.
Yes.
And one of the scenarios that's brought up related to this is, what if there was, perish the thought, a tornado that ripped through and there was a whole block that was damaged with no loss of life? There would be a lot of reconstruction going on, and it could very well be, because of the extent, that it can't be accomplished in that time frame. So that's another reason, again, to give it a bit more leeway. In the grand scheme of things, whether it's 12 months or 24 months, show a little mercy.
I would like to point out that this is why we wanted the zone to reflect the existing uses of the properties. I mean, that was why we were changing all of those lot sizes, why we were talking about the lot coverage. It would cover this. It was to make those lots conforming rather than currently like existing non-conforming. So I just have to point that out.
Well, I assume that the reason 12 months was the original period put in here was to keep lots from remaining destitute for a long period of time. But I also can empathize with the fact that you may not be able to complete such a project. Fine either way. Sure, unless you want to say something.
I was just gonna say that I work with a fair number of insurance companies. And lightly, yes. So I guess I would be in favor of 24 months. I think that would strike a okay balance. I suppose if we find that it's not working for us, but I would rather err on the side of allowing people to rebuild after a natural disaster.
I would like to make a friendly amendment to this amendment so that it's begun within 12 months and finished within 24.
I think just leaving it at 24 is adequate. So, okay, so we're voting to increase this from 12 to 24. Jody?
Yes.
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 24 months.
I was going to have a discussion about whether it's 75% or not, but in the interest of time and not having a strong feeling one way or the other, but unless somebody else wants to pick up that.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I'd like to move to prohibit off-premise signs in section 150.81, sign regulations in all zones and districts. This prohibition is in our current code, but did not yet make it to the new code.
Properly moved and seconded. Discussion?
For the off-premise signs, let's picture some establishment close to I-75 where they want to have a sign that traffic on I-75 can see it, but it's,
Billboard. Mhm.
or whatever. And if their ideal location would be on someone else's property, another business, for example, is that an example of what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's currently prohibited, and I'd like to prohibit that going forward.
Thoughts on that?
Yes.
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 Okay. What
Mr. President?
do we next?
I also distributed a short memo from Heather Saylor with a few items that she sees in the latest draft of the zoning code. I can take these one by one. I think these are pretty straightforward. we can also ask Heather questions if anyone has questions. I mean, I guess I would prefer to be respectful of everyone's time, if possible, to just move to make the changes recommended by Heather in her March 24th memo, but happy to handle differently.
And related to that, just want to express that Rachel said this is short, and you're welcome. It seems short compared to what I sent out, so glad to help. As far as all at once, I think I'm fine with all at once, but I could certainly understand if people want to go through it item by item. That's what I should have done with my 5 pages. They treat it all at once.
Yeah, so we'd have been like, oh, great, let's do that. Okay, so then I guess we'll make a motion that we adopt these editing changes.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Anyone want to talk about any of them, or?
I mean, I don't think it's accurate to say they're editing changes. I mean, she's making changes to the terms used in the use table. But I think if anyone has any questions for Heather, we can ask her right now. I'm happy to try and answer them too, but this document seems pretty straightforward to me. And my motion would be to make the changes recommended by Heather Saylor in her March 24th memo.
Second.
Which,
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever Rachel said, not what you said.
I'm just waiting if anyone wants to say, no, I don't want to vote on these collectively.
Oh.
And I'm hearing nothing. So Jody?
Oh, I had a question though. Item 6, capitalized zoning code in the first sentence. Are you trying to be controversial, Heather?
Jody?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Okay.
I buried mine in there.
Who has something else?
Well, going to do dog parks?
Sure. I would love to do dog parks. So for those of you who have Bill's memo in front of you, there is a rather lengthy list of possible zones here where we might want to explore the addition of the new glossary term we created, that term being dog parks. Now that I have had Bill type all of this out for me, I'm going to simplify it quite a bit. I would move, and I believe this is currently permitted in RC. So the only zone that I would add this to would be I, which I believe is the current zoning in effect at the county's dog park. As we heard, these are areas that tend to be more manufacturing or agricultural in nature. They're on the outskirts of town. I note that this would not be my preferred location for a dog park, but I would like the flexibility, I think, of certainly continuing what we've got there already. So that would be the motion, to add dog parks as a conditional use in the institutional zone.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay. So we're not talking about all of these zones, we're talking about only institutional.
Institutional, and it's already conditional in RC, so just institutional.
Dog parks, conditional and institutional. Jody? Yes.
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 Okay, who's got something else?
Mr.
Let's let
President.
someone else have a turn.
Oh, he just did.
Greg, you got anything for me? No? Okay. Picked. Joel, you got anything? All right, Bill, go ahead.
Thank you.
You're
I-
like that kid in class that raises his hand all the time.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been accused of worse. I'll take it. Item B in page 2, and feel free to take this from me, Jeff. Related to section 150.98, we have choice of section F. It was initially brought to our attention by our esteemed colleague Jeff Dennis. He wanted to drop section F. So that's one of the options, is to eliminate it. The current wording in the proposed code is A, the proposed use promotes the quality of life of its users and its neighbors. An adjustment that a citizen sent that was a suggestion from Perrysburg is option B. And then a subset of option B, less wordy, more to the point, is option C. So we have a choice of A through E, and obviously I can't make that in a motion. Hey, everybody vote for their favorite letter. So I think I would like to defer to Jeff, since it was his thing, on how he would like to proceed.
Give me a second. I guess I'll start by saying that I Brain is superior to Perrysburg in virtually every way. They have adopted here. I would point out that the taxes in Perrysburg are astronomical, driven largely by their land use practices, I would argue. That being said, I do think their language here, and there are two issues I have with this really. One, I think the drafting is probably not as clear as it could be, which I think is a result of having several large bodies now take a whack at it, and this is what we've ended up with. The other being, I don't know that the standard should be promoting the quality of life versus not detracting from quality of life. So, I guess all of that to say that I know I'm not prepared to make a motion on this right now, and another item that I'm planning on taking a look at and seeing if there's a way that we can do it differently that achieves the same objective, but is maybe a little bit more clear. Sorry.
So
Bill.
no, I appreciate that. So it would be basically, instead of dropping it, improving the wording.
Yes, and yeah,
I
that's
have
gonna be
no
something I'll
problem with
focus
that.
on.
And perhaps we could defer this to have Jeff do some good wordsmithing and improvement. I have no motion there. And we haven't really discussed making changes to bed and breakfast and short-term rentals. And I think the sense of council is that it does need to be taken up, but perhaps at this point in this meeting, it might not be the ideal time. So I just wanted to mention that personally, I think we should look at this in more detail, but not now.
Right, I concur. Great. Anyone want to make any other changes?
Like to summarize something, which I'm, as we all know, not very capable of doing. And that is items that we basically thought perhaps we should revisit at some point. One is what Jeff just mentioned with respect to 150.98F. And that's what we just discussed. And then also a name for the new zone. And then also related to that is perhaps a more focused look at the individual items within the new zone. Heard nothing but good comments about, from this body about the new zone. It's just a, maybe one or two things to alter with that. And then also the bed and breakfast and STR. So these are things that we should continue to work on. But in the interest of getting this back to zone code so that we can get some ordinance put together, perhaps that's
How about,
something that should hold us
how
up.
about this? I will make a motion that council look into changes with regard to bed and breakfast and short-term rental after the zoning code is done. Make that motion so that we can.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any thoughts on that? Or is there definitely wedded to the idea of doing?
As Heather pointed out last meeting, we're largely going to fall back on business regulations for some of that anyway, so it's appropriate to wait until we wrap this up. I agree with you. We should bring it up right away.
Okay, so any other comments on that? Or just sort of formalizing the fact that many of us feel this is something that we need to look at, but this is not something we're going to hold up the zoning code for.
I call the question.
Jody?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, what else? Well, should we go through the items while we're all here in one place with regard to the new zone? And rather than go through item by item, is there anything on the list someone is interested in changing? Either from this is on page 4, part of page 5 of Bill's packet. So if everyone wants to look through that real quick. Yeah, it's bottom of page 4, top of page 5. It is E2 through E50.
Also just my motion was made, Mr. President, with regard to the proposal that I said on the 7th.
Right.
That's also another place to look. I have not double checked Bill's work.
Well,
but-
thank you very much.
But then it is, just to be clear, what the motion was.
And since we're being clear, if you take a look at yours, I want to,
I said multi-unit twice.
yes, and one meant.
And one
single.
misspelled, right,
Yeah,
right,
it was single unit, right?
right.
The second one, I was looking at the.
Should be one unit dwelling.
One, yeah, because I was looking at alphabetically and it looked like, you know what?
Yep,
that's one
yep,
unit.
yep.
So that is actually something that I did go ahead with my particular one. So you could almost say mine's more accurate.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, kudos to both of you.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. She did the heavy lifting.
But what I want to do is look through these, and if there's anything that jumps out to someone as a element of this new zone that they feel is inappropriate and should be changed or moved, to address some of those.
Yeah.
And I
I
realize,
have a question about home occupation, since we're allowing homes to be built. Would it not be appropriate to allow a home occupation in that?
Home occupations are a permitted accessory use in any dwelling citywide. So home occupation doesn't appear on the use table. It's in the sections that immediately follow the use table. So if you have a dwelling in the new zone, a permitted accessory use is a home occupation per 150.54.
Okay, it just says.
Yeah, I think that's
That's a comparison. I know why that, yep. Yeah. Is my explanation sufficient, Bill? Would you add anything?
no, in fact, I think I stand corrected on that. Karma's a bit, tough. On home occupation, since I didn't see that it was listed as permitted, I assumed it was not permitted. So I think your explanation is good. So it's not that
Since
it's not permitted, it's not
I do not have an
listed.
issue with this.
Okay.
Um, Just while everyone else is looking through the list and really not listening to me, I'll mention the accessory dwelling unit. If we're trying to approach a mixed from the commercial industrial end of things, which I dearly wish we would have done months ago, accessory dwelling unit, would it seem to make sense to have an accessory dwelling unit as an option, or at least conditional, for those pockets that we were identified in the map?
So it's,
That makes sense to me.
be clear, what we approved does include one unit dwelling, correct?
Right, yes. If it was a motion, I'll second it.
I'll make it a motion, and I'll include in that motion, if Nick will agree with me, that since we used the other sheet as our standard, if you will, that we are including one unit dwelling. Just to be clear, one unit dwelling as well as accessory dwelling unit would be permitted.
Call the question.
So we're just saying that in this new zone, accessory dwelling units are permitted, correct?
If this passes.
Right, yes.
Talking about the new zone.
The ones that was just circled on the map, where one unit dwellings are already permitted.
And two
Not
unit and.
But they were inadvertently left off of the sheet.
Oh,
After the end there. Corrected that, right?
So the motion is to make a permitted use in the new zone, one unit dwelling and accessory dwelling unit.
Let's take those separately if that's okay.
Okay, can I change my motion, Mr. President? Okay, I changed my motion to one unit dwelling being a permitted use in the new zone.
Second.
okay, discussion on that.
typo anyway.
I'm hearing no
Sorry.
discussion. All right. This was a typo on what we voted on already.
Yes.
Okay.
So Bill's just being very clear.
All right,
Yeah.
so we're fixing it. So Jody,
Thank you. Yes.
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 no, I like typos. No, I'm kidding. Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Mr. President, I move that we make accessory dwelling units a permitted use in the new zoning code, or the new zone,
area.
new zone
Right.
thing.
Properly moved and seconded. Now we are discussing accessory dwelling units.
Or did you say conditional or
I
permitted?
said
I said permitted.
permitted, but I have no problem if it
I was
was.
just asking, I didn't hear you.
I figure if it doesn't pass with permitted, I'll counter with conditional.
discussion, so Jody?
Yes.
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 Okay. Anyone have anything else on this list that they feel should be changed or removed or changed from permitted to conditional or vice versa, or? Is there anything else that people feel needs to be addressed? Okay, in that case, here's what I'm going to make a motion that with the revisions that we have made, that this be given over to those be responsible for such things to craft this into a document and craft legislation that can be introduced at council with the understanding that there are still outstanding issues and things people may wish to change before the process finishes. But I would at least like to get the ball rolling. And so that is my motion.
Second to whatever you just said.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yes.
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 Okay. So unless anyone has anything else they need to say this evening, we'll call it 7:59.